Welcome to another special edition of Daily Airline News, focusing on the tragic loss of Air India's Boeing 787. I'm Jeffrey Thomas and delighted to say, joined by my co-host Richard Godfrey in Frankfurt. Good evening, Richard.
Good evening, Jeffrey.
So this episode, Richard, is aircraft software. Now, as a bit of an introduction, we're going to look at more questions on the Air India crash. Today's topic, as I said, is avionics software. In particular, what testing is done on the software and what are the sources of software glitches. Aircraft have a significant amount of redundancy. If one system fails, a standby or backup takes over. What if there is faulty software and when one system fails, the alternate system has the same software with the same fault? What if the communication between the software systems fails? On the 11th of October 2018, Scoot Airways 787-9, registration 9 Victor, Oscar Juliet Echo was descending on approach into Perth Airport. There was an uncommanded shutdown of the Wright Rolls-Royce Trent 1000 engine. The pilot decided to land on one engine as there was no time left to restart the right engine. The aircraft landed safely. The Australian Transportation Safety Bureau, along with Rolls-Royce, investigated and found worn journal bearings in the secondary high-pressure fuel pump shed metal debris. This debris clogged the inlet filter within the fuel metering valve, restricting fuel flow, and ultimately led to the engine shutdown. A simple clogged filter created a choke point in the fuel delivery system, leading to inadequate fuel supply, which made stable engine operation impossible, resulting in complete engine shutdown. So we've got some viewer comments around this, Richard, and some questions. So from Brian Ford, 1139, I can tell you that we at Bombardier are in the middle of a 5G service bulletin frenzy. They're all getting updated hardware and software. 5G is a problem for sure.
Yeah, well, you're quite right, Brian, and thank you for the inside information. We discussed 5G radio interference in episode 124 on Saturday, and we showed a screenshot of the Airworthiness Directive ADU 2024-1607 throttle malfunctions during landings from the LRRA, the Low Range Radio Altimeter. We showed another AD 2025 00294T about continuous wave interference causing a transponder failure. So one of the source of software glitches, which is what we're concerned with today, is electromagnetic interference from radio waves, such as powerful 5G antennas located close to airports.
So what other sources of software bugs are there, Richard?
Yeah, there are quite a few different sources. Another example is an EASA Airworthiness Directive from 2017 and reissued in 2019. And it addresses a specific avionics issue on the Airbus A350-941 series. An internal timer limit in the avionics modules, CPIOM and CRDC, may experience loss of communication after about 149 hours of continuous aircraft power on. This can result in partial or total system loss, affecting various avionic functions. The software glitch leads to loss of redundancy, or in the worst case, a complete system failure. The temporary solution is a repetitive power cycle reset at least every 149 hours. And quite clearly, there are a lot of aircraft out there that are kept fully powered, uh, both on the ground and in flight on a continuous basis. Now, the permanent fix is to install an Airbus service bulletin with an update to the software. And then you don't need to do these repetitive resets. But I looked around and found there are several more of these power cycle reset every so many hours. And most of them are fixed now by implementing a software fix. So there's a generator control unit every 248 days. There's a core cabin system every 51 days. There's a flight control module every 21 days. And you can do a power down or you can get the software fix.
It sounds like my laptop, my son, every time I have a glitch or two on my laptop, my son says to me, "Have you reset it, not just turned it off?" And I sort of look blankly at him. And it's something of the same. So if the system fails, switch it off and then back on again.
Yeah, but they don't like doing that in normal daily operations because a full shutdown actually takes quite a bit of time.
Mm.
They do do a full shutdown when they're doing maintenance checks, for example, especially if a system reset is required, or they're doing a software update, or they're making hardware changes, so replacing any faulty equipment. But it's not standard practice. And if you can get away with a partial power down, then fine. If you, for example, replace an engine, which apparently was the case on the Air India 787-8, then you have to, it's mandatory to do a complete power down. Everything is off.
Mm.
But because it takes time and it requires reinitialization of certain systems and recalibration of others, airlines prefer not to do it more often than they have to.
Yeah,
And
indeed.
obviously, once you're airborne, you can't do it. So
No,
that's out.
no. Now, Richard, you had an email from Kent Davis, and if I can read it. Hello, Richard. I watch your podcast religiously. Thank you. I wrote an article for Airfax Journal about software in aircraft. I had a software failure on a couple of flights in my career, and one almost became fatal. I'm not a software person, but did some investigating and come up with this article. The reason that I'm sending this to you is that it may or may not be relevant to the Air India crash. I flew for Air India after I retired from Air Canada. I flew the Boeing 747-400 for them. I enjoyed it for the most part. I loved living in India. Thank you for all you both do, and please do not let the a-holes get to you. Kent Davis.
Yeah,
Yes.
Kent speak his mind, and um, it was an interesting email, Kent, and thank you. I thoroughly enjoyed. I read the article that you wrote, and we will include the link to that article below this video, so anyone who's interested can go and take a read. Let me just summarize what you say. It's titled, "Is Software Enough to Keep Pilots Safe?" And I would add, and the passengers too. Um, I am a pilot. I'm not a software engineer or a software writer, you say. And that said, I use software like everyone else. Just about everything we do today is software related. As pilots, we're all too familiar with the problems of the Boeing 737 MAX. Well, we've been through that one, and maybe we should do a plane guys on the Max at some point, Jeffrey.
Mm.
Um, we're being told that faulty software was the cause. Well, I've also heard the lack of training and how the new systems were introduced was at fault, but we'll come back to that. And yes, there could have been problems with the pilot training, you say, but Boeing is rewriting the software, and when complete, the problem will go away. This was written a little while ago. The software rewrite is now complete. And you ask the question, will the problem go away? Will it be safe or not? So you then tell a very interesting story. You were flying an Airbus, and on descent at about 10,000 feet, you were hand flying with the auto throttle off, and you tried to move the throttles forward to get a little bit more thrust, and you got no response. At that point, you had cleared 9,000 feet on your way down in your descent. You told the first officer to check for a problem quickly, and everything was in the right place, everything. So the aircraft didn't detect any issue. And you were clever enough to, because you knew that the Airbus has a thing called the alpha floor. And this is a computer system that the Airbus installed so that the aircraft could not be stalled like you mentioned the Boeing MCAS resulted in. And when alpha floor is reached, the aircraft is programmed to go into takeoff go around thrust. So your hope was if you got down to the low enough altitude of 7,000 feet, uh, the predicament which one computer glitch got you into, the computer might just sort out for you. And lo and behold, it did. And the aircraft then responded as it was supposed to. Everything was restored, and you landed without incident.
Interesting. And that'll be a very interesting article to read. I haven't read that one myself, but I'm certainly going to read it. Yeah. So, Andrew Koch, 4720, is there a possibility that an electrical short or failure caused both FADEC and ECC to go to zero thrust or fry the CPUs and they were glitched? Likely triggered by the gear doors malfunctioning and shorting the electrical systems or electrical buses. No engine failure, no hydraulic failure, but no thrust. That would deploy the RAT or RAM and concurs with the pilot's mayday as reported.
Yeah, interesting scenario, Andrew. We don't know the answer, though, but we do know we have seen uncommanded descents, uncommanded engine shutdown, and automation system errors. So this might be another one of them. We've looked in the past at the Airbus A330 Qantas 72, which was an uncommanded descent. Kent Davis, in his article, mentions the Boeing 737 MAX events, which was Lion Air 610 and Ethiopian Airlines 302, both uncommanded nose down, where the MCAS software responded to a faulty angle of attack sensor input. We've talked about Jetstar, Boeing 787-8 on the flight from Cairns to Osaka, and an uncommanded thrust rollback to below idle, first the left engine and then the right engine. So these events have occurred. They fortunately are not that common, but it can happen again. And Jeffrey, I think you have some input from the former NTSB inspector, Greg Feit. You were reading him up on Facebook.
Yeah, so Greg's actually a good friend and we do communicate, and I've actually taken part in some of his air crash detective episodes, and I do recommend them to viewers. You can reach him easily through Facebook, Air Crash Detective, one word. But yes, Greg made the point. There are a lot of unknowns still at this point. While some things are easy to run to ground and rule out, there are a lot of things yet to be examined. He says, while we wait for credible information from the FDR and the CVR, or black boxes, there are just some things to think about. In 2010, the first 787 um, experienced an uncommanded loss of thrust in one engine during a test flight. A specific biocide in the fuel was traced as the cause of the loss of thrust in both engines of a Jetstar 787-8 in 2019. Block filters in fuel metering valve servo assemblies can also lead to uncommanded engine shutdowns. Electrical system failures that affect the ECU and FADEC. So there's some thoughts from Greg Fife, former NTSB inspector. So from Erratic Zach 1, great episode, gentlemen. I'm Paul. There are at least two things we know for sure. That is, we don't know what caused the tragedy of Air India Flight 171 and why. It'll take some time for the air accident investigative authorities to retrieve and analyze the data of the black boxes. Correct me if I am wrong, but the 787-8 is equipped with combi recorders, a combination of cockpit voice flight data recorder, which is CVDR and or CVFDR, combining the functions of both flight data recorder and the cockpit voice recorder. I won't be surprised, as it occurs in many aviation accidents, that the Swiss cheese model will be applicable to this tragedy. That is, safety aviation systems are like slices of Swiss cheese, each of them having potential weaknesses, holes. An accident can occur when these holes align. Yeah.
Yeah, that's a good point, and I completely agree with you. We do not know what happened and why it happened. The Air India Boeing 787-8, registration VT-AMB, was indeed equipped with the General Electric Enhanced Airborne Flight Recorder, which is a combined FDR with 25 hours of recording of the flight data and the CVR with 2 hours recording of the cockpit voice audio. It also has a 10-minute backup after power loss. So if there was a power loss, you're still going to get data recorded and a cockpit voice recording. I also agree with you that we're looking at multiple issues and the Swiss cheese model. In other words, each hole in the cheese represents an issue. And when they line up, as you say, we get a catastrophe.
So Shane Buell, the brakes. Why would you even speculate such a thing after stating the facts?
Shane, thank you. But we did title the episode Fact and Fiction. So we're talking about facts and then we're talking about fiction. We listed the few facts and we actually stated, and I quote, there are very few. And one fact we mentioned was that the landing gear remained extended. The reason for my statement is that because a number of viewers have speculated that the landing gear remained extended because of a hydraulic failure or electrical failure, a mechanical failure, even a pilot error. The pilot went for the wrong lever. And instead of pulling the flaps up, put the gear up, or the other way around. And so I think it was fair enough to say what I said, which is the fact that the landing gear remained extended might simply be the pilot decided to leave the gear extended to cool off the brakes. So you cannot conclude anything until you see the analysis of the FTR and whether the gear lever was put in the up position. And saying you cannot conclude anything is not speculating. Similarly, people have pointed out the Mayday statement, thrust not achieved, which is confirmed by the ATC with the timing of the statement made. And there could be several reasons why thrust was not achieved. And again, many viewers have speculated whether it was because of the GCU, the FADEC, fuel supply, software lockout, bird strike, contamination, vapor lock. And what we said was it is unknown. So we listed the facts and we listed the fiction. And to the fiction, we said we just don't know, which I think is fair enough.
So do I. I agree with you, Richard. That's fair enough.
Good job.
Yes. Patrick Lockerbie, 4308. Brakes do not overheat during takeoff. It is 99.9999% certain that the landing gear retraction process stopped when the engine shut down, with consequent loss of hydraulic power. The rat lacks the power to retract the landing gear. The focus needs to be on why, not if, both engines lost thrust at exactly the same time.
Well, I disagree with you. Brakes can overheat during takeoff. Prop Air Flight 420, the left brake overheated during the takeoff roll. It was retracted into the wheel well where it caught fire. The fire damaged hydraulic lines, leading to an in-flight fire and structural failure, and it resulted in a crash with 11 fatalities. There was recently an Etihad 787 in Melbourne that had to do an emergency brake application at 170 knots because they wanted to reject and abort the takeoff. That caused a brake overheating, wheel fires, and tire rupture. The takeoff was safely aborted and there were no casualties. But, there was quite a spectacle with all the wheels on fire. There is a reason why there is a cockpit warning, brake hot. I think, Jeffrey, you have some information on the Swiss Air Flight 306, the Caravelle that crashed.
Yes, that was a terrible tragedy in 1963. The flight was Zurich to Rome, 80 people on board, and Zurich was fogged in. So the captain thought it would be a good idea to use the jet engines of the Caravelle to clear the fog. And he did that. It took some time to clear it. But at the same time, when he's running up the jet engines and blasting the fog away, he had his obviously feet on the brakes. The brakes was locked as he did this, and they overheated. The aircraft took off, retracted the undercarriage, and then a fire consumed the aircraft from those overheated brakes. So there has been some tragedies related to overheated brakes on takeoff. Brian Friend, 238. There are only 5 reasons the rat will deploy automatically. Loss of both engines down to idle is not one of them. Loss of both engines is. Please review the 787 manual.
Thank you for pointing that out, Brian. My apologies. Actually, I did review the 787 manual, but I failed to follow my own script, which didn't say down to idle, it said to below idle. And I didn't use the word below.
At Christopher Robinson 7541, the aircraft was at 71 feet above ground level at the end of the runway and was 1,600 meters from the crash site. If the engines were shut down, the aircraft would not have reached the crash site. Hence, the engines must have been operating but producing low power. So the question is, what caused the engines to roll back? Well, I don't think that's right.
Yeah, Christopher Robin reminds me of Pooh Bear. Um, According to the ADS-B data, the aircraft reached 625 feet above mean sea level. And Flight Radar 24 altitude data is accurate to the nearest 25 feet. So it could have been somewhere between, say, 600 and 650. At the end of the runway, according to the official DGCA airport elevation chart, is at 180 feet above mean sea level. So 625 minus 180 is 445 feet, not 71 feet. And the thrust not achieved means, in my mind, the thrust delivered by the engines does not match the thrust selected by the pilot. And the required thrust at that point in the flight had not been generated or produced by the engines. So we're not saying there was no thrust, we're saying there was insufficient thrust. And I think that's what is meant by thrust not achieved.
Yes. At Deb Wings, if the podcasters could please let us know, was the Mayday call made in English or translated into English? Thrust not achieved isn't a phrase I've ever heard used before. Thanks in advance.
Yep, it apparently was made in English, and the ICAO mandates English for all international flights. This was an international flight on its way to London Gatwick. There are 17 non-Indian airlines that currently operate international routes to Ahmedabad International Airport. So the standard of using English for ATC communication would be upheld. Now, of course, in India, there are many, many languages, 22 official languages, and Hindi is the most widely spoken, but it's not spoken by everyone, and there are different languages in some areas. Uh, and English and Hindi are the languages of government and law. And English is the de facto lingua franca used in education, business, and aviation circles. So I would wait till we get the actual recording from the ATC and we can listen to it, or a transcript which indicates whether it was translated or not. But I'd be very surprised if the quote in English was not the original quote.
Dixie 3, hi Jeffrey and Richard. Thank you both for sharing your podcast video and discussion. Jeffrey, when you and Richard meet up in the Black Forest, don't forget to get and eat Black Forest Gatto cake with cream. It is absolutely beautiful and tastes fantastic.
Yeah, well, I would agree, Dixie 3. That is a fact.
Absolutely. So, viewers, that's all we've got time for today. Thank you very much indeed for watching us and participating in the ongoing discussion. Richard, thank you very much indeed for all your work today on those questions. Viewers, will be back tomorrow with more questions about the tragic Air India crash. So please subscribe to us, please like us, please keep those comments coming, and please keep those questions coming as well. And we really do appreciate your support. So thank you, Richard.
You're welcome.
Thank you, viewers.